It's December 9th, 2018. A 30-year-old entrepreneur lies dying in a hospital bed in Jaipur, India. His name is Gerald Cotten, and he's about to take with him one of the most shocking secrets in cryptocurrency history. Within hours of his death, nearly 200,000 investors will discover that their money has vanished into thin air. We're talking about $2 billion in Bitcoin and other cryptocurrencies that simply disappeared overnight. This isn't just another crypto scam story. This is the tale of QuadrigaCX, Canada's largest cryptocurrency exchange, and a mystery so twisted that even today, 6 years later, investigators are still trying to piece together what really happened. Bodies have been exhumed. Laptops have been forensically examined. Private investigators have scoured multiple countries. Yet the truth remains buried somewhere between lies, death certificates, and encrypted hard drives. Here's what we know for certain. Gerald Cotten built QuadrigaCX from nothing into Canada's biggest crypto trading platform. Customers trusted him with their life savings, their retirement funds, their children's college money. They believed their investments were safe, locked away in digital vaults that only Cotten could access. But when he died unexpectedly during what was supposed to be a routine trip to India, those vaults became digital tombs. The official story seemed straightforward enough at first. Cotten had been traveling with his wife Jennifer Robertson when he suddenly fell ill with Crohn's disease complications. He was rushed to a private hospital in Jaipur where, despite the doctor's best efforts, he passed away from cardiac arrest. A tragic end to a young entrepreneur who had revolutionized cryptocurrency trading in Canada. But here's where things get interesting. Within weeks of Cotten's death, his widow Jennifer made a shocking announcement. She filed for bankruptcy protection, claiming that nearly all of QuadrigaCX's cryptocurrency holdings were stored in encrypted wallets that only her deceased husband could access. The passwords, the private keys, the recovery phrases that would unlock $2 billion worth of digital assets had apparently died with him. Think about that for a moment. In 2018, Gerald Cotten was running an exchange that handled hundreds of millions of dollars in transactions. Professional cryptocurrency businesses don't operate like this. They have backup systems, multiple administrators, cold storage protocols, and recovery procedures specifically designed to prevent exactly this scenario. Yet according to his widow, Cotten had been operating like a one-man digital bank with no safety net whatsoever. The crypto community erupted in disbelief. How could someone managing that much money be so reckless with security protocols? How could a legitimate business operate without any backup access to customer funds? The questions multiplied faster than the angry posts flooding Reddit and Twitter. Customers who had trusted QuadrigaCX with their savings began demanding answers that nobody seemed able to provide. But the deeper investigators dug, the stranger the story became. Court documents revealed that QuadrigaCX had been struggling financially for months before Cotten's death. The exchange had been using new customer deposits to pay withdrawal requests from existing customers, a classic Ponzi scheme structure. Internal records showed massive discrepancies between what the company claimed to hold in cryptocurrency and what actually existed in their wallets. Even more disturbing was what happened in the months leading up to Cotten's death. Large amounts of cryptocurrency had been mysteriously moved out of QuadrigaCX wallets and transferred to other exchanges where they were immediately sold for cash. Some of these transactions occurred just days before Cotten left for his final trip to India. If he was the only person with access to these funds, who was making these transfers? The timeline gets even more suspicious when you examine Cotten's travel patterns. This wasn't his first trip to India. He had been making regular visits to the country for months, often staying for weeks at a time. Each trip coincided with periods of heavy customer complaints about delayed withdrawals and frozen accounts. While customers couldn't access their money, Cotten seemed to be living increasingly lavishly, purchasing expensive real estate and luxury vehicles. Then there's the matter of the will. Just weeks before his death, Cotten had updated his will in a very specific way. He left the vast majority of his estate to his wife Jennifer, but more importantly, he included detailed instructions about what should happen to QuadrigaCX in the event of his death. For someone who allegedly kept no backup access to customer funds, He seemed remarkably prepared for his own demise. The Indian hospital records raised their own set of questions. The private facility where Cotten allegedly died had a reputation for providing services to wealthy patients seeking discretion. The death certificate listed complications from Crohn's disease, but Cotten had never been formally diagnosed with this condition in Canada. His Canadian medical records showed no history of serious digestive issues that would typically precede such a fatal episode. Local authorities in Jaipur conducted a minimal investigation. The body was quickly cremated according to local customs, eliminating the possibility of future forensic examination. The death certificate was processed with unusual speed, and within days, all traces of Gerald Cotten's presence in India had been efficiently erased. For a death involving someone who controlled hundreds of millions of dollars, the lack of scrutiny was remarkable. Back in Canada, the legal proceedings began almost immediately. Jennifer Robertson hired high-profile lawyers and started the process of declaring QuadrigaCX bankrupt. She claimed to be cooperating fully with authorities while simultaneously asserting that she had no knowledge of how her husband's business actually operated. According to her statements, Cotten had kept her completely in the dark about QuadrigaCX's operations, passwords, and financial status. But investigators weren't buying it. Court-appointed monitors began examining QuadrigaCX's financial records and discovered a web of shell companies, fake trading accounts, and suspicious transactions that painted a very different picture of how the exchange operated. What they found suggested that QuadrigaCX hadn't been a legitimate cryptocurrency exchange for months, possibly years. The missing funds weren't sitting in encrypted wallets waiting for someone to crack the password. They had been systematically drained from the exchange through a complex network of fake accounts and fraudulent transactions. Someone had been running an elaborate scheme to steal customer deposits while maintaining the appearance of a functioning business. The question wasn't how to recover the encrypted funds. The question was whether Gerald Cotten had really died at all, or if his death was simply the final act in an elaborate exit strategy. As news of the scandal spread, cryptocurrency exchanges around the world began implementing new transparency measures to prevent similar disasters. But for the nearly 200,000 QuadrigaCX customers who had lost everything, these reforms came too late. Their money was gone, and the man they held responsible was allegedly buried in a cemetery halfway around the world. What happened next would turn an already bizarre story into something that reads like a thriller novel. Private investigators, amateur sleuths, and determined victims began conducting their own investigation into Gerald Cotten's death and the missing QuadrigaCX funds. What they discovered would challenge everything the public had been told about Canada's biggest cryptocurrency scandal. The hunt for answers was just beginning, and it would lead investigators down a rabbit hole of fake identities, forged documents, and international conspiracy that makes the initial mystery look simple by comparison. The investigation into Gerald Cotten's death began with a simple question that would unravel everything. A group of determined QuadrigaCX victims weren't satisfied with the official story, so they hired private investigators to dig deeper. What they found was shocking. The death certificate from India contained several irregularities that immediately raised red flags. First, the signature on the death certificate didn't match other official Indian documents. Second, the hospital where Cotten allegedly died had no record of treating a patient with his name on the date specified. Third, the cremation paperwork contained inconsistencies that suggested it might have been backdated. These weren't minor clerical errors. These were fundamental problems with the entire narrative. But the investigators were just getting started. They began tracing Cotten's digital footprint in the months before his supposed death. What they discovered was a pattern of behavior that suggested someone preparing to disappear permanently. Cotten had been liquidating personal assets, transferring ownership of properties, and restructuring his financial affairs in ways that would minimize his legal exposure. Even more damning was what they found about his travel history. The passport records showed that Cotten had been making frequent trips to countries with lax financial regulations and no extradition treaties with Canada. Each trip lasted exactly long enough to establish residency status, as if he was creating backup options for where he might eventually relocate permanently. The forensic accountants working on the case made an even more disturbing discovery. The cryptocurrency that was supposed to be locked in Cotten's encrypted wallets had actually been moved months before his death. Blockchain analysis revealed a sophisticated money laundering operation that had been systematically draining QuadrigaCX customer funds and converting them into untraceable assets. The scheme was brilliantly executed. Cotten had created dozens of fake trading accounts on his own platform, using these accounts to execute fraudulent trades that moved real customer cryptocurrency into wallets he controlled personally. He would then transfer these funds to other exchanges, convert them to privacy coins like Monero, and move them through a series of mixing services that made them virtually impossible to trace. Meanwhile, QuadrigaCX continued operating normally on the surface. New customers were still depositing funds, existing customers could still place trades, and the exchange's public wallet addresses showed healthy balances. What customers didn't realize was that they were trading with phantom assets. Their account balances existed only as numbers in a database, backed by nothing more than Gerald Cotten's promises. The timing of Cotten's death became increasingly suspicious under scrutiny. He died just as several major cryptocurrency investigations were heating up around the world. Regulators in multiple countries were beginning to ask hard questions about exchange reserves and customer fund segregation. Law enforcement agencies were sharing information about suspicious cryptocurrency transactions across international borders. For someone running a fraudulent exchange, this regulatory pressure would have been terrifying. The walls were closing in, and Cotten would have known that his scheme couldn't continue much longer. A fake death would provide the perfect exit strategy, allowing him to disappear with hundreds of millions of dollars while leaving his wife to deal with the legal aftermath as an apparently innocent widow. The investigation into Jennifer Robertson's role became more intense as evidence mounted. While she maintained her innocence, financial records showed that she had received substantial cryptocurrency transfers from accounts controlled by her husband in the months before his death. She had also made several large purchases of real estate and luxury items using funds that appeared to come directly from QuadrigaCX customer deposits. Court documents revealed that Robertson had access to far more information about QuadrigaCX's operations than she initially claimed. Email records showed ongoing conversations about the exchange's financial problems and discussions about potential solutions to their liquidity crisis. She wasn't just Cotten's wife. She was actively involved in managing the business during its final months. The plot thickened when investigators discovered that Cotten had been using multiple identities for years. He had created fake personas, complete with social media profiles, business registrations, and even tax filings. These alternate identities had been used to open bank accounts, register shell companies, and conduct business transactions that would have been impossible under his real name. One particularly elaborate fake identity had been used to establish business relationships with cryptocurrency exchanges in Asia. This identity had perfect documentation, including a passport, driver's license, and employment history that would pass casual verification. The level of sophistication suggested that Cotten had been planning his eventual disappearance for years, methodically building the infrastructure he would need to vanish completely. The international scope of the investigation expanded as authorities realized they were dealing with a global operation. Financial records showed suspicious transactions in over 20 countries, involving dozens of banks, cryptocurrency exchanges, and offshore companies. Following the money trail required cooperation between law enforcement agencies across multiple continents, each with their own jurisdictions and legal procedures. Blockchain forensics experts were brought in to analyze the cryptocurrency movements in unprecedented detail. They discovered that some of the missing funds had been converted into physical precious metals and stored in safety deposit boxes around the world. Other funds had been used to purchase luxury real estate in countries with strong banking privacy laws and weak international cooperation agreements. The technical sophistication of the money laundering operation impressed even experienced investigators. Cotten had used advanced techniques to obscure the source and destination of funds, including automated trading bots that would execute thousands of small transactions to confuse blockchain analysis tools. He had also exploited weaknesses in various cryptocurrency protocols to move funds through untraceable pathways. As the evidence mounted, a disturbing picture emerged of a criminal operation that had been years in the making. This wasn't a simple case of a cryptocurrency exchange failing due to poor management. This was a carefully orchestrated theft that had stolen life savings from nearly 200,000 victims, while making the perpetrator rich enough to disappear forever. The question that haunted investigators was whether they were chasing a ghost or a living man who was laughing at them from some tropical paradise. Every lead seemed to point in multiple directions. Every witness had conflicting stories, and every piece of evidence raised more questions than it answered. The deeper they dug, the more complex and bewildering the conspiracy became. The breakthrough came from an unexpected source. A former QuadrigaCX employee who had remained silent for months finally agreed to speak with investigators. What she revealed would shatter any remaining belief in Gerald Cotten's innocence. According to her testimony, Cotten had been openly discussing his exit strategy with trusted associates as early as 2017, more than a year before his supposed death. She described meetings where Cotten had outlined his plan to drain customer funds gradually while maintaining the appearance of a legitimate business. He had studied other cryptocurrency exchange failures and identified the mistakes that led to their operators getting caught. His scheme was designed to avoid these pitfalls by creating multiple layers of deception and misdirection. The employee provided investigators with internal communications that painted a chilling picture of premeditated fraud. In one message, Cotten had written about the importance of timing his disappearance perfectly, too early, and investigators might have time to freeze assets before he could access them. Too late, and regulatory pressure might make escape impossible. The death in India wasn't a tragic coincidence. It was a carefully calculated finale. Even more shocking were the details about how customer service requests had been handled in the final months. When customers complained about delayed withdrawals, employees were given specific scripts designed to buy time and deflect suspicion. They were told to blame technical difficulties, banking problems, or regulatory delays. Meanwhile, Cotten was systematically liquidating the assets these customers thought they owned. The whistleblower also revealed that Cotten had been working with associates in multiple countries to establish safe havens where he could eventually resurface under a new identity. These weren't casual business relationships. These were carefully cultivated partnerships with people who specialized in helping wealthy individuals disappear from their old lives and start fresh somewhere else. Investigators began mapping out this international network of accomplices. They discovered a sophisticated operation involving document forgers in Eastern Europe, money launderers in Southeast Asia, and real estate agents in South America who specialized in anonymous property purchases. Each piece of the network had been tested and refined over months of careful preparation. The Indian connection became clearer as investigators dug deeper into Cotten's activities in the country. He hadn't just been making casual tourist visits. He had been establishing residency, opening bank accounts, and building relationships with local fixers who could help him navigate the country's complex bureaucracy. India offered the perfect combination of privacy, corruption, and administrative inefficiency that would make permanently assuming a new identity relatively straightforward. Hospital records from previous visits revealed that Cotten had been meeting regularly with a particular doctor who had a reputation for providing discreet services to wealthy foreigners. This same doctor had signed the death certificate, despite the hospital having no official record of treating Cotten during his final visit. The implication was clear. The death had been staged with the cooperation of medical professionals who were well compensated for their participation. The cremation presented its own set of suspicious circumstances. In Hindu tradition, cremations typically occur within 24 hours of death, but Cotten's body had allegedly been held for several days before the ceremony. The crematorium records showed payments that were significantly higher than standard rates, suggesting that additional services had been provided to ensure discretion and speed. Local sources in Jaipur revealed that the funeral home used for Cotten's cremation was known among expatriate communities for helping foreigners fake their deaths. The business operated as a legitimate funeral service most of the time, but it also provided specialized services for people who needed to disappear permanently. The premium pricing reflected the risks involved in participating in such elaborate deceptions. Blockchain analysis continued to reveal new layers of the money laundering operation. Advanced tracking tools showed that some of the stolen QuadrigaCX funds had been converted into privacy-focused cryptocurrencies, and then moved through a series of decentralized exchanges that made tracing nearly impossible. The technical sophistication required for these operations indicated that Cotten had been working with cybercriminals who specialized in cryptocurrency laundering. The investigation expanded to include exchanges in countries with weak regulatory oversight. Several platforms in jurisdictions known for lax compliance had processed large transactions from accounts linked to Cotten's network. These exchanges claimed to have no records of the transactions, but forensic analysis of their blockchain interactions told a different story. Investigators discovered that Cotten had been using advanced trading algorithms to manipulate prices on his own exchange while simultaneously profiting from these manipulations on other platforms. He would create artificial demand for specific cryptocurrencies on QuadrigaCX, driving up prices, then sell those same cryptocurrencies on external exchanges at the inflated prices. The profits from this market manipulation went directly into accounts he controlled personally. The scale of the technical infrastructure required for these operations was staggering. Cotten had been running dozens of automated trading programs across multiple exchanges simultaneously. These programs required constant monitoring and adjustment, suggesting that he had a team of technical specialists helping him manage the operation. Finding these accomplices became a priority for investigators. Law enforcement agencies began coordinating international efforts to track down Cotten's associates. Interpol issued notices for several individuals believed to be connected to the money laundering network banking authorities in multiple countries. Froze accounts linked to shell companies that had received transfers from QuadrigaCX-related wallets. The investigation revealed that Cotten had been studying the mistakes made by other cryptocurrency fraudsters for years. He had analyzed cases like Mt. Gox, BitConnect, and numerous smaller exit scams to identify patterns that led to their operators being caught. His scheme incorporated lessons learned from these failures, making it significantly more sophisticated than previous cryptocurrency frauds. One particularly clever aspect of Cotten's operation was how he had used the regulatory uncertainty surrounding cryptocurrencies to his advantage. He had structured his business across multiple jurisdictions in ways that made it difficult for any single authority to have complete oversight. When problems arose in one country, he could shift operations to another jurisdiction while maintaining the appearance of compliance. The psychological profile that emerged from the investigation painted Cotten as a methodical sociopath who had been planning elaborate frauds since his teenage years. Former associates described him as charming and intelligent, but also manipulative and completely lacking in empathy for his victims. He seemed to view the cryptocurrency community as a collection of marks to be exploited rather than customers to be served. Financial records showed that Cotten had been living far beyond any legitimate means for years before QuadrigaCX became successful. He had expensive tastes and a lifestyle that required constant cash flow to maintain. The cryptocurrency exchange hadn't started as a fraud, but it had evolved into one as Cotten's personal spending outpaced the business's legitimate profits. The investigation also uncovered evidence that Cotten had been preparing multiple exit strategies simultaneously. The fake death in India was just one option among several he had been developing. He had also been building identities and establishing infrastructure in other countries, creating a portfolio of escape routes he could activate if circumstances required it. As the evidence mounted, investigators faced a frustrating reality. Even if they could prove that Gerald Cotten was still alive, finding him would be incredibly difficult. He had years to establish his new identity and had access to resources that would allow him to remain hidden indefinitely. The trail was getting colder with each passing month, and sophisticated criminals who successfully disappear in the initial period after their fake death rarely resurface. The human cost of Cotten's alleged crimes continued to grow as more victims came forward with their stories. Families had lost their children's education funds. Retirees had watched their life savings disappear overnight. Small business owners who had converted their cash reserves to cryptocurrency through QuadrigaCX faced bankruptcy. The emotional toll on victims was devastating, made worse by the uncertainty about whether they would ever see justice or recovery. The case had implications far beyond the immediate victims. Regulators around the world began implementing stricter requirements for cryptocurrency exchanges, demanding proof of reserves and segregated customer funds. The industry that Cotten had helped damage was slowly rebuilding trust through increased transparency and accountability measures. But for the investigators still hunting for answers, the mystery was far from solved. Every lead seemed to branch into multiple possibilities. Every witness had incomplete information, and every piece of evidence could be interpreted in different ways. They were chasing shadows across continents, following digital breadcrumbs that might have been deliberately planted to mislead them. The question that haunted everyone involved in the case was simple but profound. Was Gerald Cotten really dead? Or was he somewhere in the world, wealthy beyond imagination and laughing at the chaos he had left behind? The answer would determine whether this was a tragic story of cryptocurrency gone wrong or the perfect crime executed by a master manipulator. The pressure was mounting on law enforcement agencies worldwide as media attention intensified around the QuadrigaCX scandal. Cryptocurrency publications were running daily updates about the investigation, and social media buzzed with theories about Cotten's whereabouts. The story had captured public imagination in ways that surprised even seasoned investigators. Here was a mystery that combined cutting-edge technology, international intrigue, and the ultimate question of whether the perfect crime had actually been committed. Meanwhile, blockchain forensics teams were making disturbing discoveries about the sophistication of the money laundering operation. They had identified a pattern of transactions that suggested Cotten hadn't been working alone. The technical complexity of moving funds through multiple privacy coins and decentralized exchanges required expertise that went far beyond what one person could reasonably possess. Someone with deep knowledge of cryptocurrency protocols had been helping him cover his tracks. The investigation took another unexpected turn when authorities discovered that several other cryptocurrency exchange operators had gone missing under suspicious circumstances in the months following Cotten's alleged death. These weren't copycat crimes. The patterns were too similar, the methods too refined. Investigators began to suspect they were dealing with an organized network of criminals who specialized in cryptocurrency theft through fake deaths and elaborate disappearances. A breakthrough came from an unlikely source. Customs officials at a small airport in the Philippines flagged a suspicious traveler whose passport triggered an automated alert in their system. The man was traveling under a different name, but facial recognition software suggested a possible match with Gerald Cotten. By the time investigators could respond to the alert, the traveler had already cleared customs and disappeared into the crowded streets of Manila. The incident sparked a massive manhunt across Southeast Asia. Interpol coordinated with local authorities in multiple countries to track down leads and follow up on sightings. Security footage from airports, hotels, and banking centers was analyzed frame by frame. Digital forensics experts combed through telecommunications data looking for patterns that might reveal Cotten's current location or communication methods. But Cotten, if he was indeed still alive, had learned from the mistakes of other fugitives. He wasn't using credit cards, wasn't staying in hotels that required identification, and wasn't making the kind of digital footprints that modern investigators rely on to track suspects. He had effectively vanished into the underground economy that exists in many developing countries, where cash transactions and false documents can allow someone to live comfortably while remaining completely invisible to official scrutiny. The psychological warfare aspect of the case began to take its toll on investigators. They were dealing with someone who seemed to anticipate their every move, who had planned for contingencies they were only discovering as the investigation progressed. Evidence would surface that seemed promising, only to lead to dead ends that felt deliberately constructed to waste time and resources. Victims' groups began organizing their own investigative efforts, hiring private security firms and offering bounties for information leading to Cotten's capture. These amateur investigators brought passion and dedication to the search, but they also complicated official efforts by pursuing leads without proper coordination. Some of their activities inadvertently compromised ongoing law enforcement operations. The international legal complications multiplied as the investigation expanded across borders. Each country had different laws regarding cryptocurrency, extradition, and financial crimes. What constituted evidence in one jurisdiction might be inadmissible in another. Prosecutors faced the challenging task of building cases that would hold up in multiple legal systems simultaneously. Technical analysis of the blockchain continued to reveal new layers of deception. Advanced algorithms had been used to create false trading volume on QuadrigaCX, making the exchange appear more liquid and trustworthy than it actually was. These fake trades had been carefully calibrated to avoid triggering automated fraud detection systems while creating the illusion of a healthy, active marketplace. The discovery of additional shell companies linked to Cotten's network painted a picture of an operation that had been years in the making. These companies had legitimate business licenses, registered addresses, and even employees who believed they were working for legitimate enterprises. The level of planning required to establish such an elaborate front operation suggested that Cotten had been preparing his exit strategy almost from the moment he started QuadrigaCX. Investigators found evidence that Cotten had been studying law enforcement techniques and staying current with advances in financial crime investigation. He had subscriptions to professional journals used by forensic accountants and had attended conferences where investigators discussed their methods for tracking cryptocurrency transactions. This knowledge had clearly informed his approach to covering his tracks. The emotional impact on QuadrigaCX victims continued to deepen as the investigation dragged on without resolution. Support groups formed online where people shared their stories of financial devastation and their hopes for eventual recovery. Many victims reported suffering from depression, anxiety, and relationship problems as a result of their losses. The psychological damage extended far beyond the immediate financial impact. Some victims had mortgaged their homes to invest in cryptocurrency through QuadrigaCX. Others had liquidated retirement accounts or borrowed against life insurance policies. The diversity of people affected by the scandal was striking. From tech-savvy millennials to elderly investors who had trusted their adult children's advice about cryptocurrency investments. The regulatory response to the QuadrigaCX scandal accelerated worldwide. Financial authorities that had previously taken a hands-off approach to cryptocurrency began implementing strict licensing requirements and regular audits of exchange operators. The industry that had prided itself on operating outside traditional financial oversight found itself subject to increasing scrutiny and regulation. New requirements for proof of reserves forced exchanges to demonstrate that they actually held the cryptocurrencies they claimed to have in custody. Multi-signature wallet requirements ensured that no single individual could control large amounts of customer funds. These reforms came too late for QuadrigaCX victims, but they provided some protection for future investors. The investigation revealed that Cotten had been manipulating cryptocurrency prices not just on his own exchange, but across the broader market. He had used his access to large amounts of customer funds to execute trades that moved prices in directions that benefited his personal positions. This market manipulation had affected the entire cryptocurrency ecosystem, causing artificial price movements that impacted millions of investors worldwide. Financial intelligence units began sharing information more aggressively across international borders. The QuadrigaCX case had demonstrated how criminals could exploit gaps in international cooperation to move stolen funds across jurisdictions faster than law enforcement could respond. New protocols were established to freeze suspicious accounts more quickly and share transaction data in real time. The technical infrastructure that Cotten had built for his operations impressed even experienced cybercrime investigators. He had created automated systems that could move funds across dozens of exchanges simultaneously, converting between different cryptocurrencies and traditional currencies in ways that made tracking extremely difficult. The sophistication suggested he had been working with computer programmers who specialized in financial technology, investigators discovered that some of the missing QuadrigaCX funds had been converted into stable assets like gold and precious gems, which were then stored in safety deposit boxes around the world. These physical assets would be much harder to trace than digital transactions, and they could be easily transported by someone assuming a new identity. 6 years later, Gerald Cotten's body remains buried in a cemetery in India. But the truth about what really happened to $2 billion in missing cryptocurrency funds continues to elude investigators. The evidence overwhelmingly suggests this wasn't a tragic case of poor security practices, but rather one of the most sophisticated financial frauds in modern history. Whether Cotten is truly dead or living under a new identity somewhere in the world, his victims are still waiting for answers, still hoping for justice, and still demanding accountability from an industry that allowed such devastation to occur. The QuadrigaCX mystery stands as a chilling reminder that in the digital age, the perfect crime might just be a fake death certificate away, death certificate away, death certificate away, death certificate away, death certificate